make sure I just underscore with you all that I think the last 3 chapters of Ruler of the Nations are some of the best chapters. So be sure you read all of that, because he will go through the 5 marks of a covenant, and then he will use those 5 marks with which to explain how the 3 areas of church government, family government, and civil government can be rebuilt or reconstructed. And so those should be familiar, all those should be familiar terms and familiar concepts to you. But I just want to spend a little time on a couple of things that I think were interesting, and I don't want to read the book for you, so I'm not going to do any reading, but I just want to put a couple things out here as we're wrapping up today. I want to specifically deal with some in, and I guess because I'm a pastor, it was interesting to me, church government and civil government. Let me give you there's the different 5 areas, 1, 2, 3, of a covenant, and he explains the aspects of those covenants. But one of the things he talks about in that is, first off, under church government and how you rebuild it. In other words, the church is compromised. Let's put it in more contemporary terms. If the church is compromised and it's not doing what it needs to be doing, then what are the steps to begin to get it pointed in the right direction? He said the first one, we have to go back to God is sovereign. Now about half of the evangelical churches are going to go tilt, because they don't teach God's sovereignty, they usually teach man's sovereignty. And that's the difference sometimes between Calvinism and Arminianism. That man, because of his choices, is more sovereign. But we need to get back to teaching God is sovereign. And he maintains that needs to take place through doctrinal instruction, and interestingly, creedal statements. Now, I don't get real inspired by reading, the Apostles' Creed or the Athanasian Creed or creeds that came out of the Council of Chalcedon or any of those. These guys do. But I think the point that he's trying to make here is that we have lost systematic instruction into our people and into even our young ones with regards to creeds. We don't do creeds in Charismatic Church. We don't even know what they are. Creed is a band to us. That's all we know. It's somebody who plays music. Most of the creeds came out of various councils in the early years of the church that made statements with regards to what the church believed doctrinally. If I asked one of you to Google up the Apostles' Creed, I suspect many of you probably have heard it. Some churches to this day still quote it. I believe in God the Father, maker of heaven and earth, and in His Son Jesus Christ. And it has a Catholic kind of ring to it, but it really can't be associated to modern Catholicism, because creeds existed before even modern Roman Catholicism. And they were the statements that were made in order that Christian people knew what they believed. Well, the whole point here is this. What are we doing in order to make sure believers know what they believe? What are we doing doctrinally? Do you understand, in some churches, and again, these are not our churches predominantly, but I remember growing up in a Methodist church, you had to go through confirmation class. What was confirmation class? Confirmation class was basically a class you went through that would confirm your parents' commitment that was made either at a dedication or a baptism, that you would be raised up in the Christian faith. And so confirmation class was the moment that you confirmed that what they promised you were now taking on personally. And what you did in that class was you learned doctrine. Now that doesn't happen anymore, because kids aren't going to learn doctrine. They want technology. They want puppets. They want Ronald McDonald. Are you following me? Yeah. So again, I'm not saying you can't use modern technology in order to instruct. I'm just saying that he says in order to get the church back, we have to get here. Then he says that we have to understand that this church was established by God. And he pulls in the idea once again of covenant. That when you are part of a church, it's established by God, and when you're in covenant with the church, and again, in America, this is really challenging because you've got options galore. I mean, you've got options on every corner and more. But there's no such thing as an isolated believer. A believer is in covenant with God, and if you're in covenant with God, then you're in covenant with what God establishes, and which is His church. So every believer needs to be in a real, live, local church. That's massive revelation for some. That you don't get, and I realize this is challenging mentalities, but I know, because my son Clay pastors what's called sub-30, which are people between the ages of 18 and 30 years old, and they're basically shoppers. I mean, they'll go to his Wednesday night, they'll go to this Sunday, they'll go to this here, and they're all over, but they're in covenant. Well, they think they're in covenant with God, but it doesn't relate to anything earthly. They're in covenant with nothing earthly. So, for the church to be rebuilt, we've got to understand that we're in covenant. If covenant doesn't exist between its members, really nothing else is going to happen. All right? They say number 3 is to reestablish it needs to be a boot camp, not a love boat. What does that mean? It means that there has to be, whatever takes place, has to lead people to the place that they can rule themselves. Remember, self-government. Under God. Everything's under God. I guess that's assumed. But we must rule ourselves. And therefore, there has to be aspects of what they call boot camp. You know why you go? Do you know why you go to boot camp? Anybody here do military? Yeah. Well, if I just said, hey, tell me all the things you learned at boot camp, I guarantee you they would be applicable to who we are as the people of God together. You learn to be a team. You learn to be in a unit. You learn authority. You learn how to take orders. You learn how to respond. When your platoon sergeant comes in and he says, we're going to take this hill, we don't form a committee meeting in your platoon to figure out whether or not that hill's worthy to be taken. That's sure not the church. I mean, you can't. I mean, the church at times is a family. There's lots of images that is used, but we're also known as the army of God, which is really kind of funny. We ought to laugh when that comes up because we don't function much as an army. So I need to go on so we get through all this. The church needs to be established again as a court where discipline can flow forth. We are lawless because the church is unable to discipline those, because people aren't in covenant. See, because the minute we get to this one, everybody goes, oops, God's leading me.
Yeah, right.
See, there's no sense of, now, and this is really hard because you've got leaders who aren't really worthy to be followed, and they aren't being scriptural, and so things are so egregiously out of order that sometimes you can't blame people for going, heck no. And so I'm not saying that there aren't reasons that people come and go and all the rest. But you understand, there comes a moment that you have to say you're in covenant. It's like in your marriage. You're in covenant. This thing isn't fun. It isn't easy. It is the giggles and tickles and all that's are gone. This is work. It's hard. We want to say, and we do it. And we do it in the church. We spring out of it and say, I'm going to go somewhere else and do it again. But there's never growth. And there's never the fruit of the labor that takes to happen. I was on the thread the other day. I don't know, some of you are kind of follow these things. But I'm going to use Southern Baptist because it was a Southern Baptist thread. But Southern Baptists have painted themselves in a corner. And I'm just saying as a denomination. And a lot of and Pentecostals have too. I can't just say, but this was a Southern Baptist thread. Because we have allowed to exist in our churches people who are in sin, egregious sin, We've allowed leadership to maintain their adulteries and their fornications. We've allowed single people to retain their fornications and to function within even leadership. Not just membership, within leadership. Even pastors in certain churches are allowed to egregiously live in certain ways. And then all of a sudden, the homosexual community looks at us and says, well, we want to participate in the life of the church. And we all go, no. Well, what do you think that looks like to them? When our theology has been, well, all sin is the same, because what we're left with now is either looking at him and saying, well, no, your sin's different than my sin. And they laugh and go, really? But what's happening is we're being confronted by the homosexual community. The church is being confronted on its lack of, because they're looking and saying, heck, you got half the deacon board running around. They're gossiping, they're drunk. And you let them keep doing that, and now you're going to call me on my sin? You married that deacon's son and that deacon's daughter. They were living together for 3 years, and you're marrying them, and now you're telling me you're not going to marry me because of my sin? How does that sound? I don't blame them. They're calling the church on its hypocrisies. And the church is going, well, you're different. And it doesn't pass the smell test. Because we don't do this anymore. And when we try to do it, we're being led other places. So the church is now sitting in its own doo-doo. All right, I just want you to hear that. If you don't ever hear it again, you can say you heard it here first. And then they have to be taught that they're true heirs of God. I kind of got my second wind here. True heirs of God, which means we have an inheritance, all right? That we're the heirs of God. The church is the heirs of God. You understand that the church, and I remember when I told this to you in another class, and I told it in another venue before, and it's amazing, but we have as much authority as the federal government. We have as much legitimacy to exercise authority as the federal government. And so when the federal government, you know, right now, within our federal government, there's this power struggle that exists now between the Congress and the executive and the judicial branch. And you know why they're fussing with each other? Because they're all looking at each other and they're saying, I have as much authority as you do. You can't tell me what to do. I have as much authority as you. And everybody's thrown out the Constitution, of course. We're not even functioning according to that. But listen to me when I tell you that. That's why when the government looks at the church and it says, you must do this, or you will lose your tax exempt status, you cannot do this, and you look, and that's why pastors have got to, because they're the voice, they've got to look and say, no, we will not do that. I have as much authority in this jurisdiction as that representative does in his jurisdiction. No. Now, you may have the guns to come take me to jail, and maybe I will go to jail, and I'll rejoice because I was counted worthy to suffer for righteousness' sake. But you understand. Why? Because we are true heirs of God. See? All right. I'm just messing with your mind, so when they come get me, you all come visit me. Brad will be there with me. All right. Maybe they'll let us be cellmates. All right.
I don't know if you can.
Probably not.
Okay, let's go to civil. You're probably right. Okay, let's go to civil government real quick, and we'll get all of this. Now, all of those items within the 5, we could make application to, but I'm just going to go quickly here. And then this is going to be this is some real practical stuff. And this is what's going to be hard for us. And I'm working through all of this too. But the first one is this. In order for civil government to be rebuilt, we've got to get off the government dole. Okay, now I understand And really my view is that I don't really have a problem with Social Security, and I tell you why. It's because you legitimately pay into it. So I think it's a terrible investment policy, but at the same time, you paid into it. So I don't think there's anything wrong with receiving from it, because you have legitimately put money into it. But the fact of the matter is, we've got people whose whole life is designed with regards to benefits. And I was talking about that pastor I was visiting with, Leslie, just a sharp guy, and he goes, I had a couple come in, and they were talking about the phone that the government gave them. You know, they were called the Obama phones. And he said, I sat down with him and I said, are you telling me you couldn't afford your own phone? Well, no, we could afford our own phone, but we gotta. And he goes, what are you doing? What are you doing? Well, since I can get it, I'm going to take it. I hate to say that I have family members who were for a time on, I think they called it WIC, or maybe it's now EBT. I don't know what it was. I had family members, and I'm listening to a conversation one day in a kitchen. This is my family tree, and in this conversation, I heard one say, well, you know, I've got 4 gallons of milk coming to me this week. The other one said, well, you going to drink those 4 gallons? Well, no, I probably don't need a gallon. But they're giving me 4 gallons. So what are you going to do? I'm going to get my 4 gallons. Now, there's a mentality at work there that's got to change. All right? And so we're going to, and this is going to be hard for us because everyone else is going to be accessing it. But you have to understand that what they're accessing is a government that's printing money up that's not worth a dime, and all of this is going to go away real quickly. So you need to start thinking about how you can wean yourself off all of these things. Number 2, we have to begin to dismantle the current benefit system. The reason the government is as large as it is because it buys votes everywhere. It buys them everywhere. Promising everything, gives you money, wants to give you money. And I mean, who amongst us, really, if someone's giving you money, won't keep them giving you money unless you came to this class? You're going to keep saying, keep it coming my way. And so that's going to have to be dismantled in order for civil government to begin to be rebuilt. And this is what the sad part is there's going to be an economic collapse and all these things are going to go away. I've already seen it in Russia, and if you know anything about what took place when communism fell in Russia, you will see exactly, that was the socialist state, and you will see exactly what happened. There was a generation that just wandered aimlessly in their poverty. The only ones that survived it were the young ones who could acclimate to the new system, which was capitalism. But the whole thing was dismantled because they couldn't afford it. Number 3 is that you must begin to defend biblical precept. Listen, don't let that humanist say that's religion. I'd look him in the eye and say, and yours is too. Religion is what you worship. It's what you value. It's what you venerate. It's what you idolize. It's what you spend your money on. Your worldview is exactly that. Now, they'll sit there and they'll claim they're as neutral as can be. But we've got to learn to defend biblical precept. And it's going to require you to do that at your workplaces and schools and churches. Pastors should be helping their congregants do that better too. So, number 4, this is interesting what he said. Serve on juries. Isn't that an interesting thing he put there? Why? Because the jury system is one of the only ways as Christians we can begin to say that despite the fact that you have codified a law, if it's evil, you understand? You can function in a biblical manner whether or not the law is necessarily biblical. Because you know the first thing every lawyer will ask you, are you able to do so-and-so? And you know, you have to answer those questions. And a judge will look at a jury and say, you must, this really isn't right. I've read up on this. When a judge instructs a jury and says, you must evaluate this on the basis of this particular law. Well, if it's a wrong law, no, you don't. That's why we have a jury system. Because ultimately, in the judicial system, it was never meant that the one guy sitting on the bench had the last say. It's that everybody had their day in front of their peers. And so to serve on a jury, now they never take me. It's interesting, whenever I go serve on a jury, because the only ones I've ever got were drug busts and DUIs. And they'll always ask the question, do you have any religious convictions concerning alcohol? And I don't lie, so I go, well, yeah, I'm a pastor. You're excused. Drugs will do it too. The other thing is they want manipulatable people. And once they know that they can't do that, they don't want you either. But this is a way we can get involved in the judiciary system. You know, that we're working with legislation and we're working with elections, but this is a way that we can actively serve on juries and have a say with regards to that. And you can influence an entire room. And then finally, reduce or abolish taxes. And it's the simple phrase, what you feed grows, what you starve shrinks. In my vetting with Fox News, I went through actually 3 levels of vetting before you ever get the okay that you're on television. And I got that after a while. I didn't understand at first, and then I was starting to see what they were doing because they just obviously don't want something on television that catches them off guard. But during the vetting process, we were talking about religious freedom, and the lady was asking me questions about what pastors can say, what they can't say, and she was always hitting the moral issues, abortion or same-sex marriage. I said, whoa, let's call a timeout on this, and let me say that when I say I'm talking about public policy issues, it's far greater than abortion or same-sex marriage. Let me give you 2 quick examples. I said in the Bible, a king by the name of Ahab, along with his wife Jezebel, seized a piece of property from Naboth because they wanted it and he refused to sell it. That's an eminent domain issue. And so a prophet came by and he called him on the carpet and he said that wasn't just and it wasn't right. And so if I have an eminent domain issue that comes into our city and they're wanting to seize properties in order to build roads and they're doing it in an unrighteous manner, then I am going to speak out against that, and I will name the names of the politicians who are advocating for that unrighteous act. I could hear her hands typing in the background. She goes, oh, this is great. This is great. This is great. I said, the second one is, I said, when Israel wanted a king and it no longer wanted God to rule over them, the prophet came and told them that they would be under tyranny because he would ask for 10% of their land and 10% of their livestock, which was a 20% taxation upon the people. So if the government suggests, whether it's local, state, or federal, that they want to raise my taxes and it goes above a 20% framework, then that is tyranny, and I will name the names of the legislators that are wanting to pass such things because it's tyranny. Oh, that is great. And she said, oh, I was just making her day on the phone. And I said, this is more than just abortion and same-sex marriage. I said, there is a framework of understanding that can be applied into public policy. And I intend to apply it there and teach my people the same. And we intend to challenge people who want to violate those values. Oh, you're going to be great. You're going to be great. And all this. Well, we never got to those things on television, obviously. But to say that to them, and to hear them on the other end, because they're kind of going tilt.
It's not something that's ever been said on national TV, you know?
Well, exactly. So, because right now, there's a perception that if we want to reduce taxes, it's all about our greedy nature because we more of our own money. Well, no, God's Word says that if it's taken away from you and I can retain it again, I have the opportunity to be benevolent. I have the opportunity to help my aging parents. I have the opportunity to send my kids to college. I have the opportunity to determine what I want to do. And really, it's not even what I want to determine, what God tells me to do with those monies. But so when we get on board with libertarians who want to reduce taxes too, our motive is entirely different. But that's one of the ways we got to reform civil government, because if they get more of your money, this is really hard for me. Government usually gets your money before God gets it, because they're taking their money out before you even see your check. And that really fries me. It really fries me. But there's nothing that could happen. But that's the place they want to take in our life. And they will take even more than God gets in your life. And some want them to take even more. You heard the old saying that liberals are generous with your money, not their own. So, all right, guys, I'm going to stop there. I can't go any further. And it's 7:30. Is there any last wisdom you want to throw on the table before we wrap up and cut you loose tonight?
Pastor, there's
Yeah.
just what you were talking about a minute ago. I just looked it up because I remembered reading it yesterday. There's a dock and a waterfront community in the city of Charleston that apparently has been arguing between the city of Charleston and the community and the homeowners association. Joe Riley now says he will take the dock by eminent domain if they don't agree to sell the property to the city, so that everyone can have access to their community dock that all these residents have paid for.
Right. Well, now in the story of Naboth's vineyard, they were willing to strike a deal with Naboth. He just didn't want to sell. He didn't want to sell the property, but that wasn't. So what you're saying here is it is appropriate for the government, if they want property, to offer a fair and just price for that. We all know they can go and blight things and do whatever they want, and a lot of times they do. And that's unjust and evil, biblically. But that would be a perfect example of if that was a member or there was a pastor in the neighborhood, or that would be a real cool one to go call up the Post and Courier or a television station and just in a reporter's ear, just say, I'm just letting you know that this Sunday at church, I'm going to preach a message on Ahab and Jezebel seizing Naboth's vineyard, and I'm going to apply it to Mayor Riley. I think Mayor Riley is Ahab. Well, I'm just telling you. And you know, but what have I not applied the scripture in context?
Yeah.
Or am I not allowed to do that? Or because I named a name, am I not allowed to somehow do that? Take me to jail. Take me to jail. I guarantee you, man, cameras would be on. If we started doing that stuff, the cameras would come and these politicians would scatter like bugs. They'd want to go so far from this stuff. But you see, pastors don't want to stand up and do this stuff. I mean, they just... But, 7 of them reversed a Houston mayor. I can tell you right now, 6 of us caused a piece of legislation to finally get to a subcommittee. It doesn't take much. But if I could get the 50 guys that stood up there to do some work this January in zeroing in on our legislature and that MUSC issue, they'd pull out of that abortuary and we could shut that freestander down. But we'd need 50 of them to do it. If we could get 50 of them, I guarantee you it'd scare them to death.
What is the loophole that you were talking about with MUSC?
That's what the Attorney General said. I don't...
so that's all they had to say was, there's a loophole and it's okay, and that's all I have to tell
Well, and as like Pastor Eubank said, then let's close the loophole.
Yeah.
But
He wouldn't say what. Yeah, he doesn't want to say what the loophole is, so you can't fix it.
well, we could probably find that out relatively easy.
Yeah.
It's just, and maybe Bobby knows it. I don't know, but it's just we didn't have the sufficient voice to pursue that anymore. But let's close the loophole. Let's shut it down. But what people don't want to do is MUSC is a prestigious place and for our state and for our nation, and nobody wants to give it a black eye, so to speak. But it is. It's other than it has a stellar reputation, but this is wrong. And it's we can affirm what we can affirm, and then we'll challenge what we can. But I think that may be the one that, as a pastor's group, we zero in on. If we can get a victory under our belt on that one, and we can make MUSC move, I think we can take our influence out for some other drives.
Something's being shaken up in there. Those administrators are jumping ship like crazy. And they're not saying anything, but it's like, okay, what's going on?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. So we'll see. I mean, we're having a discussion about that, and there are some that are eager to do that. So that may be the one we do.
What's the pastor that they're going after the mayor of Houston is going to?
Yeah, Jim Garlow put a post out. He had Eric Stanley come, and Eric made that announcement, although I didn't read in the article what the pastor's name was. He just said it wasn't over, that there was one pastor that was still being subpoenaed. I took it to mean not out of the original 5, but a new one that they were targeting, since that has been... See, the enemy knows what to do. As soon as they withdrew the subpoena, it took the steam out of everything. And everybody kind of calmed back down. But then what they did was they said, well, instead of getting 5, we'll just get 1.
And we'll do it quietly.
Yep. These people aren't giving up. So, yeah, so we have to be vigilant. And again, we got to take the defense off the field, and we've got to put an offense on the field that causes them to burn up time, energy, and money on defending things, because no one likes to be in that position. And so there's some strategic and tactical things that have to be considered. But the church, while it's this great organization and it's a built-in mechanism with which we can exercise incredible influence, we are the gang that can't shoot straight. I mean, we're a pretty haphazard band of people. I mean, just trying to, again, I know what it's like and how long I've spent working to get pastors together, and it took a lesbian mayor in Houston to finally light a fire under some of them because they thought they were going to be next. I'll take them that way. I wish they had come another way, but I'll take it whatever way they'll come. So you may be hearing more of that come January. We'll talk to Lee on that one. I think Lee Bright will do it for us. But we've got to zero in on one thing. We've got to get a win on one thing. We can't go 7 ways. We've got to zero in on this one. All of us together, we will zero in on this one thing. And if we you get that group, you get the Catholic Church on board, that's massive. And Michael Aquilano told me there, he said, whatever you need, he said, we're going to do it. So he was pretty pumped. So, all right, so these are the things, these are the trench. Now we're in the trench. The inspiration is great, but now we're in the trench. All right? All right, well, we'll pray and stop there. I'll let Brad go get in the trench.